Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our weekly Q&A with the Family Support Team at the St. Louis Arc. I'm Sharon Spurlock, the Senior Director of Family Education, and I'll be your host today for a really great conversation about our upcoming accreditation with the Council on Quality and Leadership. Without further ado, we're going to start off with Georgia Cuss, who's going to introduce herself. Georgia, tell everybody a little bit about your journey at the Arc.
Good afternoon. My name is Georgia Cuss. You can see on the screen perhaps that's Kuss is the last name spelling. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Director of Quality Enhancement and Training here at the ARC. I've been with the ARC for almost 10 years. I'm a couple months shy of 10 years. I started out in residential services with direct supports over at one of the homes in Dottel Circle. And I worked for several years in day services with our older adults, our retirement age day program, Aging with Empowerment, at a couple different sites. We have 3 locations now for our AW programs. And I've been with the quality and training team since 2022. So this is my first time going through our big accreditation, and I'm on this team, and I'm excited to talk about it today.
Hey, Steph, I feel like you've done this before.
I've done it a couple times. Stephanie Scott, Vice President of Support Services and Strategy. I've been at the ARC, it'll be 15 years next month, so excited about that. When I started at the ARC, I was fresh out of grad school, having gotten my degree in social work, and I was our coordinator of quality enhancement at that time, which was a department of one, working with Sharon and others to make sure that we did a great job with accreditation and implemented all the stuff that came from that. So have had various roles since then and am very excited to have this opportunity to talk about accreditation this time.
Well, bring it on. Let's get
All right.
started. Stephanie's going to show everybody a short presentation and then we're going to dig into questions. So here we go.
Right. So we're going to just talk a little bit about our history with accreditation and where we are now. So we have had a very long-standing relationship with the Council on Quality and Leadership. Um, CQL has been around since the 70s. It really started as part of another accreditation body, and they broke off to be separate to focus specifically on agencies that support folks with disabilities as well as mental health. And we've partnered with them since then. So we have officially been accredited since 1983. And accreditation, just like the ARC, has evolved quite a bit over that time in terms of the different accreditation options offered and what that process actually looks like. But what has always existed is a focus on quality of life for the individuals who get services and how an organization makes sure that they are person centered and that they are flexible and that they are supporting people and staff well. And so the way that they've looked at that has just shifted a little bit over time. One of the main ways that they and we look at that quality of life is through the personal outcome measures, which really came to be in 1993. These are 21 different outcome statements that really are meaningful to all people, regardless of whether you have a disability, but oftentimes can be overlooked. Things like people participate in the life of their community, people have friends, people are respected, and making sure that we look at how does the person define that for themselves? How do they feel that is going in their life right now? What do they want to be different? And what kind of staff support do we offer to work towards their vision for that outcome? So we have embraced those and really used those to do planning with folks and to look at, as an agency, how we are doing in those 21 different areas. So then comes 2004. Uh, they started offering some other accreditation options at that time. We sought to receive the value added accreditation, which lengthened our accreditation period by a year, which was exciting when we achieved that. And then accreditation stayed similar for a while. And then in 2016, they began offering what was called person-centered excellence with distinction. So that is the highest level that you can achieve with CQL. There's less than 10 organizations who have that designation. So it is truly an honor to receive that. And just because you get it once doesn't mean you get it again. So they're always kind of upping the ante with those standards and making sure you are continuously meeting those. So we went through person-centered excellence accreditation with distinction again in April of 2021. You'll notice there's a little bit more time between that 2016 accreditation and 2021 because of COVID. So we should have gone through accreditation in 2020. It always aligned with presidential election. It's just when the timing hit. And we, because of COVID, pushed that back at the time in hopes that we'd be able to be in person, but that's really not what the cards dealt us. So we did a fully virtual accreditation then, which was quite the experience. So we obtained person-centered excellence with distinction again at that time and are looking to get that again. So it's a 4-year accreditation period. It doesn't mean that you just go through that visit and are done. You've got to work throughout that entire time. So, what is accreditation based on? What are we even talking about? What are we doing in the meantime? There are several sets of standards that we demonstrate, we embrace and measure and are continuously doing. Basic assurances is one set. That's probably the biggest amount of prep work we do, is to do a self-assessment around that and provide documentation to validate that self-assessment. Georgia, it was like 500 plus lines of a spreadsheet we had to fill out specific to that. So lots of in-depth thinking about what our processes are and what that looks like. So that is really the basic things that we're expected to have in place related to health, safety, security, lots of policy related things, procedural related things, which are all very important. Shared values really looks at whether you are walking the walk, talking the talk. You can have value statements, you can have a mission and a vision, but what does that actually look like day to day? And do those things align? So demonstrating, again, through a self-assessment, and then there will be questions throughout the week that they pose to various folks to validate what we believe we do to embrace shared values. Community life is really what it says, of how we support people to engage in their community, and also as an organization, how do we become leaders in the community? How do we advocate for not just folks with disabilities and their rights, but all people? Make sure that we're paying attention to issues that impact all people, and demonstrate that. Then there comes the personal outcome measures, which I spoke about already. And then there is a whole set of person-centered excellence standards, which is what a lot of our work during that accreditation week is based on. We do prep work in advance to gain information through surveys and focus groups about how people feel we're doing with those standards. If you are on the webinar today, you may have received that survey earlier this year and had the opportunity to provide some feedback. So we take that data, we take the anecdotal information we collect through conversations, and we identify our strengths and opportunities related to those standards. How do we as an organization make sure that at anything we do, we're person-centered, that we are also family-centered, that we are taking all those things into account? So all that information we gather is presented during what's called Stakeholder Day, which is the Thursday of accreditation week. And then the group that is there gets to vote on the top 3 factors that they think we should work on. So that is a cool moment where we get to really see that decision in action. And then we are responsible for implementing plans related to what was chosen over the 4 years. That really helps increase the quality of our services. So one thing that we really appreciate about the CQL experience is this idea of appreciative inquiry. So they don't come in and just point out, here's the things you're not doing right, or here's the opportunities to do things differently. They also encourage us to think about what's going really well. And if we did more of that thing, it would have an even bigger payoff for folks who receive our services, families, community members. So it really is a positive conversation where lots of learning happens, and we're making decisions from there. There's lots of reasons why this matters. Because of the services we provide and the funding we receive, there are some requirements about either going through accreditation or being licensed by the state of Missouri. We've always gone through accreditation. That has really been the focus because we felt like accreditation takes us beyond just making sure policies and procedures are in place and is really looking at people's lives. And are people leading better lives because of interacting with us? Or, are we a barrier? What are we doing to work towards our mission and vision? And there's a lot of things that CQL has in place that they do a lot of research around, that they go around the world and they learn about best practices from other organizations and can bring that to us. So we benefit from all of that research, all of those activities and information. And they connect us to other organizations all the time, which is a great opportunity.
Hey, Steph.
Yes.
Before you leave this slide, there's a question that I think really aligns with this slide that I want to ask. The last question we've got, and we've got some great ones, I might add, is asking if CQL is a government entity and how they became sort of the standard in the field. And I think a lot of this slide describes why they're the standard. Can you add to that?
Yeah, sure. They're not a government entity, so they're separate from the government, although government entities like Departmental Health recognize them as a leader and identify them as an option for approved accreditation organizations. They have their own board of directors, they have their own oversight. And yeah, they were consulted from the beginning of when the government started trying to set standards in place for services for folks with disabilities, whether that was through home and community-based services. And a long time ago, the ruling they had then, the more recent rulings, the final ruling that was put into place, CQL was a part of all of that and really being consulted on, how do we look at whether services are benefiting people or not, and that people are having the lives that they want. So yes, a lot of this points to why that is the fact, as you said, Sharon.
And I do really think that whole beyond compliance statement, we had a pre-submitted question about why we chose CQL. And I think it's really because of that alignment of values, that this
Absolutely.
isn't about checking boxes for whether or not our documentation looks good. It's about really digging in and asking some challenging questions. So
Yeah,
I think appreciates that.
absolutely. Every time we get prepared to submit an application for accreditation, we go through an exercise where we compare CQL to other options and make a determination about whether or not CQL is still the route to go. So we do an analysis every time, and we feel strongly that we go through lots of reviews from whether it's funders or other entities to see whether or not documentation is in place, our compliance related things are in place, that we didn't feel the need to go through another thing where maybe that was more the focus. We really have always felt strongly that looking at quality of life and making sure that people we support are really giving the feedback and that staff are giving the feedback about what that looks like was most important for our growth as an organization. So just a couple points about what happens to our services as a result of this process. We do leave accreditation with that, it's called a What Really Matters plan that really focuses on those person-centered excellence factors, where our quality enhancement committee really works hard to make detailed plans around that and implement that. It involves then departments across the organization to support that effort and give feedback. And that also gets folded in with what's called our quality enhancement plan, which outlines all the different ways that we measure the basic assurances, the data that we are tracking, the results of that data, the targets we're aiming to achieve, and processes to monitor those things. And that those plans we really revisit annually. CQL has us revisit that what really matters plan at the 18-month mark, um, and then at the 36-month mark. And so we get to chunk it out. It's hard to plan for 4 years. So being able to say, okay, between now and 18 months from now, here's what we want to achieve. And then, okay, what have we done? What's the next step here to take it to the next level, which I appreciate. So lots of ongoing work to make sure we are both addressing all of those standards and then also uh, really working on those plans to continually improve services. So that is the basics of what accreditation looks like, what we're trying to accomplish, and what happens after.
There is nothing basic about that CQL accreditation. So thank you. When you look at all the pieces together, it does feel a little bit overwhelming, and it's nice to see it all, though, to know that it's very comprehensive in what we do. We've got a lot of amazing questions. Before I turn to them, I just want you to kind of give everybody the basics, Georgia. When are they coming? What does each day look like, maybe in general, that they're here?
So the Council on Quality and Leadership is assigned us 4 reviewers for this this level of accreditation. 3 of them are coming in person, and 1 will be exclusively virtual. And we have them really booked up. So the fun thing about it is that they really want to meet with actual stakeholders, people who receive services from us, family members, staff members at all levels, and they want to talk with the quality and training folks and the QE committee, but only some. And so we mostly have each day jam-packed with meetings and visits and interviews and focus groups, which are all variations on a theme there, right? But with face-to-face time, mostly in person, some virtual, with different programs and different people. So we've got a smattering of examples are like a conversation with people who work with some of our older adults, visiting a couple of our early childhood centers where the embedded program does its work, visiting different homes and different day services sites too, visiting somebody at work who receives supported employment services, visiting with folks from our READY committee who do DEI work, meeting with community partners, meeting with family members, a lot of fun things like that. So it should be really good. And then we mentioned earlier in the conversation that sort of stakeholder day on Thursday of that week. And that is a chance to really decide how it's been going, our sort of 3 big focal areas over the last 3 years, and what 3 focal areas we might want to pay attention to for the next 4 years. Hope ideally 4 years if we reach the same level of accreditation again, which is the goal.
Who are part of the stakeholder group?
Absolutely. So that will include a lot of people who provide direct support care in a couple of different programs. We'll have a few family members. We'll certainly have people we support in the room. And those will be the people having the nitty-gritty conversations about what matters to them for what they want the agency to be working on moving forward. Toward the end of the day, we'll certainly have some folks who are in leadership roles also, some of our directors group, some of our QE committee members come and support that and help synthesize the information that those groups have been discussing to then make some decisions on what's next.
I love this question because it just makes me laugh. When does the prep work start? How far in advance? I feel like there's never a day when we're not in CQL mode. So, as with other accreditations where you might suddenly start looking at your documents, that isn't how it works with this.
Yeah, absolutely. So It is omnipresent, of course. As soon as we pick our next 3 goals at this upcoming stakeholder day, we'll wrap up the week. We'll take a tiny break, but then we'll pull the QE committee together again to say, okay, these are our 3 new things, and we'll develop our plan around those. And so those projects will be ongoing. We have check-in visits with CQL that are just virtual touch bases at 18 months and 36 months. So those are our touch points to make sure that we have been working on our What Really Matters plan in those 3 big goals that we set. And that helps keep us accountable and moving forward. And then we get our date for the big accreditation visit, usually 4 to 6 months in advance. It's a little bit in flux depending on their calendar and our calendar, but it usually is around then, and then it's really go time. So I don't know. And the last 2 months before they come are kind of intensive, and we're really in the thick of it now, with being 2.5 weeks away, 3.5 weeks away. So should be good.
I've seen the grid with the 51 meetings on it. So now is the time,
Now is go
all
time.
good things happen right now. Um, so I'm just going to go through the questions because they're all over the place.
really
and they're
good.
Really good ones. So Stephanie, I'm going to ask you the first one, and then you guys can kind of pass things back and forth. The first question was, do we talk to these other agencies that have our level of accreditation? Just wondering if there's ever opportunities to discuss tips and tricks with other accredited agencies.
Yeah, great question. We've always partnered really closely with a organization out of Indianapolis who has this level of accreditation. We've gone there, they've come here. We've shared, how do you measure this thing? How do you implement XYZ? We've had a lot of dialogue over the years with them. And that list of organizations with that level of accreditation kind of ebbs and flows. So they are a longstanding partner, and yeah, we've been connected with some other organizations where due process is often a hot topic. Just learning how people run their rights committees and involve folks. So yeah. Short answer, yes. Long answer, in lots of different ways over time.
Yeah.
To really learn from each other.
And I know there have been times where when we've been in accreditation, they've said, I believe this other agency might be a good resource for you.
Yep.
I know we've also received calls saying we've recommended that this agency reach out to you.
Yeah.
So it's a very nice open door kind of a policy. So is there anything that's going to be different this time in 2021?
People are here in person again.
In person.
Which is the coolest piece. I think everyone's excited about that. We had our visit 3, the 36-month check-in that I mentioned, was in person this time around because they had not been here in person since 2016, and normally that's virtual. And it was so much fun. I was tangentially involved in the 2021 accreditation just through some stakeholder stuff and some meetings, but the virtual was fine, and they did a great job being ethical with that. But I think the in-person is going to be great. And aside from that, most of the structure is much the same as it's been in recent years. They have a pretty standardized approach to their accreditation process so that it can be unified across agencies, and everyone's asked to do the same things. So not much else has changed, I don't think.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got to talk about weaknesses. So when they do identify an area, let's talk about that from 2 levels. Maybe an area we could improve on, but then also there sometimes have been areas that they expect a correction on. Can you talk about what that might look like?
Absolutely. So if it's something that is like a basic assurance, we expect that you're going to make a change very specific to this. We typically have 30 days to address that and send verification of that. For other items that maybe you don't really need to correct right away, they're going to expect an update on those things at that 18-month visit. So you'll also submit what your plan is to address it, but there's not as tight of a timeline. And sometimes they're just going to give you recommendations to consider where you might leave accreditation and have lots of conversations about that thing, and uh, maybe you go a different direction, and that's all fine. I think a lot of the CQL process is really to have us think and process and have conversations with people so we can figure out what makes the most sense and what works for everyone.
Fantastic. This question makes me laugh too. So, are a lot of our committees in existence due to suggestions from CQL? We have more committees here than I've had in previous jobs that weren't accredited by them. I
That's
think
such a
that's
That
good
might
really about the
example.
ARC.
I know, yeah, I was gonna say, Shannon, that might even be a question for you because those all of our committees, for the most part, existed when I started at the ARC, and in various ways, right? That has changed over time. Um, I'd say a lot of initiatives that we end up doing come out of accreditation that those committees are then implementing lots of it. And I think, what's interesting about our journey with accreditation is because we've done it for so long, it is so baked into our philosophy, our values, how we approach the work, and our procedures that you don't always hear, like, this is a CQL thing because it's an ARC thing, because those are
Which
synonymous.
is why we pick CQL is because the values
Absolutely.
align. So I think both directions apply to that. And same to another question, similar to why the quality department grew over time. Used to be a group of one and now it's many. I think that's the same, that we believe in continuous quality improvement at all times, and that, yeah, aligns really nicely with what CQL is looking for. And
Yeah.
that's why we picked them.
Yeah. And the ARC has grown. The ARC has
So
grown significantly during my time. And in order to support that growth, the quality team also grows, and, expectations from funders and people we support and training needs, like all of that impacts, what's needed within that quality team to do all the things.
I love this one's a good one. So apparently we've made it clear to everybody that the CQL accreditation is a party. And people are saying, I've always wondered this. We have these parties during accreditation week. Why isn't this seen as bribery on a certain level?
it's a tricky
Why do
question.
we do parties and fun events when the accreditation
I
comes?
love that question. So CQL really wants us to showcase who the ARC is. What makes us different, that signature strength, right? The ARC advantage. Like, what is that? And I think so much of what makes the ARC who we are is celebration. And celebration, the small wins, the big wins, the day-to-day life, and finding those opportunities and embracing relationships with the folks that we support and with each other. And to me, it's just a microcosm in the week of who the ARC is, just kind of boiled into those opportunities to show CQL who we are. And from my perspective, there is some stress that comes along with the prep, and I want quality to own that, right? Like, we want to get all the pieces together, but I want it to be a really enjoyable experience for everyone else involved. Like, I don't want it to be stressful. I want it to be like you are showing off uh, what makes this service really cool, or helping someone we support really show off their accomplishments and what they're proud of, um, and and also the opportunity to reflect on what could be better, what could be
Yeah.
different. But doing that in a constructive, positive way too throughout the
Yeah.
whole week.
I
I
think
will say too, I don't think we spend very much money on gifts per se. We have
No.
activities that demonstrate fun and so I think if you actually looked at the dollar amount, it certainly in no way would influence their decision.
Yeah. And I think we have found over the years also that CQL is very ethical. Just because, as Stephanie said, we got this level of distinction last time doesn't mean we're getting it this time. They're going to ask us the hard questions. They're going to push. They're going to hold us to that standard no matter what, as who they've always shown themselves to be. And so I think we can count on that to be true no matter what with all these pieces. And especially since the beginning of the week, the end of the week, the stakeholder day, those the sort of party moments are including all the other stakeholders. We want it to feel like a good time for those folks, and appreciative for people who are contributing their time and their energy to come show off with us, and to thank those folks for leaning
Yeah.
in too.
Yeah.
And we'll feed people because that's what the ARC does. We care about food. We're going to do those kinds of things. Um, and also, Georgia, I'm glad you mentioned that because the other piece that I don't think I said is that we don't really find out whether we get this level of accreditation until weeks after. So historically, with the other levels, like they will tell you on that Friday uh, what you received. Now, for person-centered excellence with distinction, they take it back to a committee made
Who
up of
didn't get Mark's Turtle Bars?
I know. They weren't there. These are folks who were not there. So there is objectivity built in to see, well, did they meet the standard or not? And which I also appreciate. There's some rigor there, which I appreciate because then
Yeah.
it makes it even more valuable.
So
Good question.
hypothetically, what happens if we don't get accredited?
If we don't get this level of accreditation, we would get one of the other levels. Uh, if the ARC had done a 100% 180 on all of our approaches and had nothing in place, they would take us down to level 1, which is called like a basic assurances accreditation, and they would get back to the basics with us. But I don't feel that we're there.
Yeah.
If
So
that were the case, we'd want them to tell us, and that would be appropriate. And we would rather know than not know, just like we would rather not earn this on a bribe. We want our work to stand on its own merits, and we all work really hard for that. We were thankful during our 36-month visit again, that the reviewer who came in person met with people, listened to our information, looked at our slides, and pointed out things that she felt hit the distinct level, and put us in this category. And so that was about a year ago. We're wasn't quite 36 months, but close. But she at the time felt like there were many things that we were doing then that we are absolutely still doing now that were distinct, which was a great check-in to
Yeah.
help
As
help feel
somebody
motivated
who was
around.
around in 1983, I will say I have utmost confidence that we will get a good accreditation. So that doesn't mean we're not working our butts off because that's what we do all the time. I want to answer this question. Do we get extra funding with this accreditation? No.
no.
This is one of my favorites. Can you tell us some things that we have improved on through the years that CQL has called us out on? So while you guys think about that, I'm just going to answer for myself. I can remember about maybe it was 12 years ago, 16 years ago, they were very focused on how we were engaged in community partnerships that impacted people with disabilities. And they were talking to us about how are you participating in generic transportation collaboratives? What are you doing about affordable housing? And I was flabbergasted at the time. I thought, I can't even keep up with all the coalitions that we're in internally. How could you even expect that from us? And I've been reflecting about it lately a lot because that is the core of so much of the work I do now is working to make sure that when they're talking about affordable housing, they're including people with disabilities, to make sure when we're looking at issues related to immigrants, we're thinking about families that have children with disabilities. I mean, I don't even question it now. And it was something that they really introduced to me. What about you guys?
And that now pervades so much of our culture in other ways, like so much of the training that the training team does, much of which is driven by Sue Shaw, one of our trainers, and Carlton McKinney, who co-trains with her, is about that kind of intersectionality of groups that can benefit from some support in our communities overall. We're bringing in mental health supports and integrating that with disability and with IDD. We're looking at trauma in different ways, housing, transportation, all of that community access. We think, yeah, that's a great example, Sharon.
For me, there's been quite a bit of effort over, I'm going to say, the last 8 years around reporting in various ways and our work to ensure people know how they can report anything from abuse and neglect to a grievance to, they're not pleased with the decision to like daily stuff that maybe they just have questions on, and making sure that people who receive our services understand those things, that they can self-report. If you're a staff at the ARC, I hope you've heard of the Did It Make You Pause campaign that really came out of some accreditation efforts to really increase the time frame which in people report something that like just made them pause. Like we don't need everyone to be able to decide whether something is actually abuse and neglect or whatever. Like we just, if something doesn't feel right, we need you to report it. And so lots there. We've done a lot of work with uh, contracting with a third party reporting hotline, Lighthouse, which is owned by Centrio. So those names kind of get tossed back and forth. And we recently completely revamped our grievance and appeals policies to try to streamline that into something really straightforward for everyone involved, and sent that out to families. And so seen a lot of work there.
Awesome.
I
I'm
think
going to
CQL
combine the
also,
last. I'm sorry.
Connor, I was just going to say, I think CQL helps us make sure we're being thoughtful always, no matter what, about the language we use to talk with people and about people, because it's any of us who have done this work for a while know it's a moving target, because every time you shift your language, the stigma takes a minute to catch up and then gets reattached to your new language. And that's the nature of linguistics. That's the nature of the English language. That's the nature of communities and social justice. And so we think creatively about that a lot, and we adapt our trainings for new hires and for existing hires to sort of help keep up with that. Person first language is our baseline, but we also really support identity first language if that's what someone wants to use. All those things that are pieces that we would do anyway, but CQL helps us make sure we're thinking ahead, and that's part of the conversation every time we touch base with them, and that's really great.
That's a great example because I think we've heard so many examples about how their appreciative inquiry with people who actually receive services allows them to strip away what seems okay and shows when maybe there's something that isn't really happening the way you think it should be happening. So that's just such a good part of it. The last questions are really about participation. One is how much is the board involved, and the other was about how should residential houses, how can we prepare? What do you need from us? So I'll leave it at those two.
Sure. Uh, we keep the board up to date on when accreditation is coming, progress and preparation, what it's going to look like. And usually there's some board members who are invited to some meetings. They will get debriefed after about the results and focus areas for the next 4 years. Uh, the program strategy committee of the board gets to pay some extra attention to some of those pieces. And say, we are currently wrapping up on our um, strategic plan period as well. So, we're going to go through accreditation, and then pretty quickly after, we're going to start preparing for strategic planning, which in my mind actually aligns really well because we're going to be able to take this information that we've gathered and fold that in, which the board is heavily involved in strategic planning as well. So trying to pull all those pieces together so they work together to further our mission.
And thanks for the question about what do we need from residential homes or other locations. That's a really lovely offer of support as well. And yeah, mostly just week of. We'll need you to keep bearing with us between now and then, we, the quality team, as we keep working hard. for the most part, if you are either a staff member who is attending a specific meeting or you're supporting someone who's involved in a meeting or an interview or a focus group, you'll probably know by now, but there are always scheduling snafus between, and pick a date here and then insert date of accreditation week, and there's always stuff that can happen. So we may tag other folks in last minute, but the biggest way that you can be involved uh, during the week itself is to keep an eye out for some virtual invitations and physical invitations to the parties. We do want people there. That is why we're leaning in and making them big, and they should be really fun. We're trying. We want it to be fun. So we hope you'll consider attending either virtually or in person for some of those week of meetings. They should be the party ones. They should be fun.
Anything else you guys want to add?
Just that
Uh,
we're grateful for the work everyone has done. We are really lucky to get to show off the work that all of the programs and agency departments do, and and that very much includes families who support people who receive services here. It includes the people themselves that are in our programs. We're grateful that all of that is as strong as it is because it's a fun time to show it all off.
And to add to that, I'd say thank you to everyone who filled out the survey that we sent out. The vast majority of our staff completed it. We got lots of uh, surveys from family members and folks that we support. So that is incredibly helpful to allow us to kind of get the finger on the pulse of how folks are feeling about those different person-centered excellence factors. So that is incredibly, incredibly helpful and meaningful for where we go from here.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very grateful that you all could give me this much time in the midst of the busiest time of your work to come and share what's happening with the upcoming council accreditation. So I can't wait, frankly. So if you're nervous about it, just don't be. It's going to be a grand time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.